In any case, okay, so I was thinking first to talk tonight really about something related to Tsaras, because of the Parsha, but then I came across, on Wednesday, I came across such an interesting machlekes. I had not known about this. This is new information for me. And it's related to Mesachtas Makis, to what we're learning, and it's fascinating. I want to share it a little bit. But I just want to give some background information. This is a little bit history, storytelling, and then we'll get to the actual machlekes. Jews living in Christian countries in the 1000s, 1100s, 1200s, 1300s, etc. As the Christian church became more and more powerful and more dominant in Jews' lives, and that's where I think almost everybody at this table comes from. That included Spain, it included France, it included Germany. As the Catholic Church became more dominant, they paid a lot of attention to what does the church hold about Judaism. That became a big need for them. What is the church vis-a-vis the Jews? What does the church think about the Jews? And we know some of the horror stories, let's say, of the Crusaders, what the Crusaders did to the Jews. Even the first crusade in 1096 is very famous. There, tens of thousands of Jews were massacred, whole communities were destroyed overnight. Because of that, half of the kinnis that we say are from that tkufa of Arachamim that we say in davening every Shabbos is from then. So we know about that. But even after there was the church dialed back the animosity a little bit after that, even the Pope, after the crusade in 1096, realized that they took it a little too far, and they dialed back the animosity so that by the second crusade, when Pope, whatever his name was, Pius, or I forgot exactly, Pope Pius the Fourth, the Third, right? Whatever he was, he said, okay, we can't just kill the Jews. Wanton killing the Jews, is not okay, but at least for sure we should take their money, as you pass through the towns. For sure you could take their houses, their cattle, their food. So the Jews lived under this very, very oppressive regime of the Catholic Church, who was, very busy being rid of them. Now, that was, so to speak, let's call it physical redifus. And in the church, there's a lot of, today they've taken some of them out, but you were able to see, in the church is where the peasants went for their education. They would have paintings of Jews, with long claws for fingers and ugly horns and hideous noses and red teeth and red eyes, painting the Jews as the devil and showing all sorts of scenes of the Jews doing terrible things. The church itself spread blood libels all the time. The Catholic Church today is not our biggest enemy, so it's hard to imagine the type of enemy the Catholic Church was to Klal Yisrael, but the Catholic Church was a terrible, terrible foe for Klal Yisrael. Now, one of the interesting ways that they went after the Jews was starting in the year 1230, the Catholic Church, under Pope Gregory, Pius, whatever, instituted the idea of being rid of the Talmud. They started this, basically what it is some Jews who went off the derech and became Christians would go to the church, to the church masters, the Pope or whoever, and they would say, listen, the Talmud is full of blasphemy, it's full of anti-Catholic things, it's full of, jokes and things making fun of Jesus and etc. It's full of shtusim, it's full of things that make no sense, it's full of bad law. And they would campaign that the Talmud is a terrible document, and because of the Talmud is why Jews are so misled and so corrupt. And if only the church could outlaw the Talmud or ban the Talmud or burn the Talmud, then Jews would have their heads on straight and everything would be fine. This became like a new angle of attack. Now, in the year 1230, there was a Meshumid, a guy who was once a Jew. I don't think we know what his Jewish name ever was, but his name was Nicholas Dunnan. He led one of the most famous battles against the Talmud. He wrote a document that we still have today with 35 tainis against the Shas, 35 things that he thinks are terrible about the Talmud, and he sent them to the Pope. The Pope set up a debate in Paris in the year 1240 or 41, where some of the famous Balei HaTosfos, Rabbi Chilmi Pariz, the Smak, Rav Moshe of Kutzi, and other Rishonim had to debate Nicholas Dunnan on these 35 kashas that he had in the Talmud. Obviously, these debates were not, freedom of speech. Just as a story to highlight this, in one of the history books that the Catholics have, there's a story with King Louis of France, who staged a debate in a church somewhere, and as an honor to an old knight who had served him, well, he allowed the old knight to ask the first question of the debating. And the old knight came in, hobbled on his crutches. He was all beat up from the Crusades, and he asked the Jews a question about the Talmud. Oh no, he asked them, "Do you believe in the virgin birth?" He asked the Jew. And the Jew right away says, "No, of course not. We don't believe in a virgin birth." And the guy took his crutch out from under his arm, smacked the guy in the stomach. And all the Jews went running out of the church. And then there was a debate in the church. The guy who was running the debate, the priest said, this is not a way to have a debate, you have to let them talk. And he says, let them talk? I should let Jews come into our holy place and blaspheme our gods? This is what you do to them. You stab them in the stomach. And the king, Louis, who's going to host the debate of the Talmud, writes about this story glowingly. Like, Azah Kiddush Hashem, that this old knight that he was Mechabed was able to, really set it straight. So it just gives you an idea anecdotally of what type of debates we're talking about. Now in 1240 there was a debate. Obviously, Rabbi Chilmi Pariz and the Smak did their best to defend the Talmud, and I'm sure they did a wonderful job, but it wasn't meant to be won. And in 1241 or 1242, on Erev Shabbos Parshas Chukas, which is today in the Magen Avraham, this is still a fast day. Some people still fast this day. 20 or 40 or 24, a lot of different nuschayos of wagons full of Gemaras were gathered up and burnt in a square in Paris. Now, you have to understand what that means, because Gemaras in those days, there was no printing press. Every Gemara was written by hand. So you take 24 wagons full. I do the math. It's a lot of Svarim. It's probably almost all the Svarim that they had. Every single thing, every single thing there was burnt, and it was burnt. It was such a traumatic and consequential event that the Merami Rutenberg, Rameir of Rutenberg, who was from the Gedolei Rishonim, who everyone has heard of, wrote a famous kinna called Shali Srufa Be'esh that we say in Tisha B'Av, that's monumentalizing this event that happened in Klal Yisrael's history in 1240. So now this is called just an overview of the Talmud as a weapon, the Gemara as a weapon against Jews. Now this was not the last time, even though a later pope had a change of heart and allowed the Jews to have their Gemaras back in 1247. But after that there was different burnings. Another very famous one was in the 1550s in Italy. There's more of them. It kept coming up. The Talmud was under attack. There were books that were written by various different, apostate Jews, by various Catholics who could read Hebrew, who could read a translation of all the different various kashas on the Talmud. Now, many different Gedolim tried to address these questions. The Rashba, Lamashal, has a sefer called Biurei Agados La Rashba. It's printed in the set. You can see it. It's not a very fat sefer. Biurei Agados La Rashba. Now, why did Rashba write the sefer? The Rashba wrote the sefer because there was many Agadas that were being mocked. There was Agadat the Gemaras that at face value made very little sense in a realistic way. And these Gemaras were becoming known to the Catholic world and to the world in general. And they were being mocked. And they were saying, look how silly the Talmud is. It's a silly document that doesn't make any sense. So the Rashba wrote a sefer called Biurei Agadas. Ridaya Pnini, another one of the Rishonim, wrote a sefer on Biurei Agadas to explain this. Now, and etc. But it never really helped. And I think, unfortunately, if you go on Twitter today, you'll see many of the same tainus on the Talmud and the same Gemaras that they find strange and the same kashas are just recirculating again. And the same thing keeps coming up. It didn't go away. But now, one of the primary tainus that they had on the Gemara, and this was not just saying it was silly. This was a taina they held that proved that the Jews' way of thinking about halacha and thinking about yashrus and what's right and wrong was so debased and so off the mark, was a Gemara that we all just learned over here. The Gemara says a famous din, a known din in Din of Hazama that goes as follows: Hargu ein neragin, loy hargu neragin, which means if Edom come and they testify that Reuven should be put to death, if they succeed in getting Reuven put to death, and then only then they're proved to be Edom Zaymin, the halacha is they don't get punished. They escape. They get away scot-free. But if they try to put Reuven to death and they get caught, and busted that they're Edom Zaymin before they manage to put Reuven to death, then they get put to death. Now, and the Gemara points this out and says this is a din, this is a halacha. Now, if you think about it logically, it would seem that the opposite should make sense, right? If you attempt to kill someone and you're unsuccessful, okay, so Baruch Hashem, in the nick of time, we saved it, nothing terrible happened, no harm, no foul. Maybe a little fine, some malchus, something just to make you not do this again, but big deal. If you actually managed to kill someone who didn't deserve to be killed because you said faulty edus about him, then throw the book at you. Then we should kill you. Then we should punish you. Meaning this is counter logical, right? This is against basic logic. What does this mean? Now the Gemara, the Mishnah on the Fayamid Beis brings this din, says it's Xeris HaKasav, that the pasuk says. Kashazamam lases la'achiv, meaning the achiv is still alive. It's a diak in the pasuk. The Gemara asks that Baribi was sitting and learning with his father. His father asked him this kasha, that this doesn't make sense, and he said that at best it's a kal v'chomer. You can't learn a halacha from a kal v'chomer. That's what the Gemara leaves off. So the Gemara is very aware of the fact that this is a shvera din, but it's a halacha. It's Xeris HaKasav, and the Gemara passes like this. There is no chaylik in the Gemara. It's a Gemara two places in Makis. It's a Gemara in Chulin. There is no chaylik on this din. That Edom Zayman has this anomaly. If they're successful, they don't get punished. If they're unsuccessful, they get punished. This is a din. Now, the Tzdukim, who lived in the times of the Mishnayos, they argued on this, and they said the opposite. They said only if you're successful you get punished. If you're not successful, you don't get punished, which is very reasonable. That's what the Tzdukim said. Now, comes along the various different people who are attacking the Gemara, and they use this Gemara as a proof that the entire legal system of the Jews is faulty. How do you make sense of this? Nicholas Donin included this in his 35 Tainis, this and another similar Gemara. Other Svarim put out by different various, apostates and Christians, included always this Gemara, and they said, this is a proof that the Jews' logical structure of their punishments makes no sense. It's a faulty logic. So what do we do with this Gemara? And what's the fight about it? So let me just talk about the fight first. We got to keep track of the clock. I want to get to some of the Torah. But let me just talk about the fight first, and then we'll talk about this. In the 1600s in Amsterdam, there was this very interesting kehillah. There was a kehillah there of mostly Jews who had started their lives as Catholics. Meaning these were Jews who had fled Spain, by the Spanish Inquisition. They all converted. They all became Catholics. And then over time, when they came to Amsterdam, they had the ability to come back to their faith, and they all started returning. But they were missing certain building blocks. The whole Girsa de Yankasa of being raised as a Jew, all the basic things that you grew up knowing and believing and just assuming, they didn't know this. They were all coming in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and turning over a new leaf and becoming Jews again. They didn't really know all the basic things, and they had a lot of questions that we would consider basic, a lot of tinus, a lot of things that needed to be addressed for them that maybe wouldn't make it to the basic curriculum today. Now, their Rav of the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue in Amsterdam at that time was a Rav by the name of Reb Shalom Mortara. He wrote a sefer called Givat Shol. Reb Shalom Mortara. He was the Rav, and he addresses in some of his speeches. Givat Shol is a sefer of speeches, and he addresses a lot of themes about Yiddishkeit and the basic understanding of Yiddishkeit and etc. in his drushes. His drushes were published in Amsterdam, then they were published later again in Warsaw in 1911 with Haskama from Chaim Soloveitchik, which is a big Haskama because almost no Svarim, certainly not from a Sephardi Rav in the 1600s. A sefer of Vertluch on Chumash from a Sephardi Rav in the 1600s generally doesn't get Haskama from Chaim. It's a big mark of approbation that Rav Chaim gave Haskama to the sefer. So this is Rav Shalom Mortara. He's the Rebbe. He's the Rav there. He's the Abezdin. He actually has a Talmud who's becomes a very, very famous Shegitz by the name of Baruch Spinoza. I don't know if you guys heard of him. What? No, I don't know. But he becomes a very famous Shegitz. If you're into philosophy, you might have heard of him. If you didn't, also good. But he's the Rav over there. Now, there's another rabbi who finds himself in Amsterdam. His name is Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas. Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas is actually the person, the gadol, who gets credit for taking down Shabtai Tzvi. He was one gadol who was clear-eyed about Shabtai Tzvi from the minute he came onto the scene, more or less. That's an exaggeration a little bit, but basically from the minute he came onto the scene until seeing it through to destroy him, to get him, banned from everything Jewish. Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas is the man. He wrote a sefer called Sittas Nevel Tzvi, which he writes the whole expose of Shabtai Tzvi and all the letters and all the back and forth. He's very famous for that. Now, he was not so successful as a Rav. He say this diplomatically, he was tough. He didn't mind fighting. He didn't mind, getting into the trenches, and he was tough, and he didn't have so much success as a pastoral leader, as a communal leader. So he was kind of like a free agent, a designated hitter who was floating around, different communities at different times, and he had a sharp pen. His chuvas, it slips my name right now, what the name of his chuvas sefer is, but he had a sharp pen, a sharp tongue, and he was able to clear-eyed, very, very, a tremendous Talmud Chacham and a very good Eina Pekicha. He knew exactly what was going on, but he was a sharp man. Now, Reb Shalom Mortara gave a speech in Shul on Shabbos. Parshas, I forgot which parsha it was. 2 weeks in a row, he gave a speech on Shabbos to address this taina of the Gemara and Makkas. He says, I've become aware, people have approached me, people are asking me about this Gemara and Makkas, this din of that if the Eidim Zayman were successful, they don't get punished, and if they're not successful, they do get punished, and how it seems illogical, and how the Catholics point to this and say this is a raya that Jews and their laws make no sense. And he had a extremely novel proposition. Now, I'm going to tell you what he says, and then we'll wind our way back to what other Rishonim said about this kasha. Rav Shalom Mortara comes and he has a very novel proposition. He says as follows. Here's how you read the Gemara. It says the Gemara says, Hargu ein neragin. They don't get killed. He says, what does that mean? We learned that Gemara, everyone reads it, Kipshute, ein neragim, they don't get killed. Right? Simple taich, they don't get killed. It says Rav Shalom Mortara, that's not what it means. It means Hargu, if they killed because they were Eidim Zaymin, ein neragin, they don't get killed as Eidim Zaymimin. Meaning the chumras of Eidim Zaymimin, whatever that would be included in the chumras of Eidim Zaymimin, that they don't get. But of course, they get put to death as a Ritzeach. They're no different than a regular Ritzeach. And what would be the nafkamina? Let's say they gave someone the einish of skila. They came in, they said someone's Mechal Shabbos, he gets skila, and the guy gets skila. Now, Bezdin comes, and they become Zaymimin. Bezdin says they deserve to be put to death as a Ritzeach. Ritzeach gets Chanek. So they get a different death. They get buried in a different section in the Beis HaKvaros. There's the Chanek section and the skila section. There's different dinim. Someone who gets killed b'chanek, someone who gets b'skila. Says Rav Shalom Mutara, a tremendous out-of-the-box way of thinking. No, you guys are all making a mistake. The Gemara never said that they don't get killed. Of course they get killed. They just get killed under a different tab.
It's not a lav shem by Maisa?
So he addresses that. Says Rav Shalom Mutara, I ignas mitzalav shem b'maisa. So he says, if you'll note, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that any time Bezdin puts someone to death, the pasuk says, Yad ha'edim tiyeh bo l'rishayna. The Edim's hand should be in it to start. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that the Bezdin includes the Edim in the killing. Meaning we make the Edim put their money where their mouth is. You said this guy deserves to be put to death? Okay, so step up and help put him to death. Said, so what you have over here is mamish like an on-video killing. Bezdin's able to hold these Edim Zayman back in and say, every one of us, Dayanim, saw you kill this guy for no reason. Because your Edis has nothing to stand on. It's
also?
So he doesn't address that, but his point... That's it. Yeah, you don't give us. So maybe he'll learn that once you get to that stage, and this is his creative out of the box way of saying it. It says it becomes a murder on camera. It's like you did a murder in front of the whole Bezdin Hagadol. No, it's more than that. You're going to put them to death. Really for live.
Bezdin decides in that case.
Bezdin decides. If Bezdin comes,
I'm saying in the case of a regular guy does a killing in Bezdin.
Yeah, Bezdin will say, they'll split up. Bezdin will say, here, I'm the Eidim, these two are Eidim. Exactly, put the guy to death and done. Okay, this is his...
You still need Eidus.
Yeah, you still need Eidus. Okay, so this is his idea. Fine, so this is his idea. This is his out-of-the-box idea. He says, of course there's a death on the table, it's just a different death on the table. Now, Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas hears about the drasha. He happens to be in Amsterdam at that time. Eventually becomes a Rav in Amsterdam. He hears the drasha, and he is actually extremely respectful and deferential of Shalom Mutara. He writes him a beautiful letter. It's poetic. It's a beautiful, beautiful letter. Many, many pages of the letter. It's beautiful. It's a poetic letter. But he writes, my friend, come on. This is not a thing. That's really what he says. He's like, I'm respectful. It's creative. It's geschmack. I get it. I see what you're trying to do. You're addressing a kasha that's being thrown at you. I get the whole thing. But this is not pshat. This is not what the Gemara says. There's no chaylik. There's no one who says this. It's mamish out of a hat. You're pulling this up. This is not. You can't say this now. So 1 second. So they have it's like a 5 or 6 piece back and forth about this. Each one trying to prove his side. Each one bringing rayas, lekan. But Tzim Seif, I think in this one, Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas, this is probably the traditional view that we don't say that this guy is being killed. So then, what is the answer to the question? Meaning, if you're not going to say like Rav Shalom Mutara that the Yidden Zayman get put to death when they accomplish their job, so why don't they get killed? Why does it make sense that they shouldn't have an einish? So there's like a whole plethora of reasons given throughout the Rishonim. Some you'll find more convincing, some you'll find less convincing. Let's share some of them. So, and when I say some you'll find, I mean some of the Rishonim find less convincing, meaning amongst the Rishonim, many of them argue on previous ones, have kashas on previous ones. Let me say like this. The Ramban starts off, the Ramban says as follows. The Ramban says, if Adam came to Bezdin, they were made that someone deserves to be put to death. And the Bezdin put him to death. And then there was a revision. Hazama came, they said these Adam are false. He says, you know what? If Hashem allowed it, that this guy was actually put to death by Bezdin, Mistama, it's true that he really did what the Adam said about him, and just the Hazama was fake. We couldn't prove it, and it looks like the Adam did something wrong. You have to assume if Hashem let this happen, then he really deserved that this was the einish that he had coming to him. He really did what they said. That's what he says. That's what the Ramban says. Others come along, so 1 second, the Rikanti tweaks this a little. He says, no, you don't have to go so extreme. Yeah. Well, it's a similar concept. So it's a similar concept. Yeah. So it's a similar concept over there. Because over here they did a good thing. Meaning over there everyone did something wrong. No, over there's a galgal achayzer. They all did something wrong over there. You were careless, but Hashem only allows your carelessness to impact someone who actually needed to be killed. But you're also going to get punished for being careless. Over there it's a continuing chain of Over here, no. The Ramban is saying you didn't lie. The Ramban is saying if Hashem let this happen, then it must be that they told the truth. the second Edom came and ramazim them, something went wrong. For some reason, they weren't able to prove that they told the truth, but they must have told the truth, which is a very extreme way to say it. That's what I'm saying. The Rikanti comes and he tweaks it. He says no. He says more like what you're telling too from Gal. He says you don't have to say that the Edom actually said the truth. These Edom lied, Taka, and they're going to be punished for lying. They did something wrong. But obviously, the guy that they lied about had it coming to him for some other reason. He did something else that was very deserving and advantage. He had it coming to him. So the Rikanti makes it a little more understandable. Comes along Rabbeinu Bechai asks, okay, that's all great for why the guy who's getting put to death deserved to die. But that doesn't mean that the guys who put him to death shouldn't get punished. How does that make any sense? According to the Rikanti, they did something egregious. They did something terrible. These Edom Zayim came, they were made on someone, they put him to death. Yeah, it turns out that guy had it coming, he deserved to die. Okay, but you weren't the guy who was supposed to put him to death. You weren't supposed to do what you're going to do. How does that resolve anything? So says Rabbeinu Bechai, a different svara. Golos, yeah. So says Rabbeinu Bechai, he has a different svara. Rabbeinu Bechai says, no, that's not the reason. The reason is, I might be confusing now the names, who says what, but I think he says the reason, this might be the Meiri. The Meiri says the reason is, Zilusa de Bedina. It's just going to make Bezdin look foolish. Yes, Bezdin dropped the ball here. They killed the wrong guy. They trusted Edom, they shouldn't have. They slipped through the cracks. But if you're going to let it be undone now, then it's just going to make Bezdin look stupid. Nobody's going to trust Bezdin anymore. And the mistake has to stand for the greater good, so to speak. This is the greater good argument. The Meiri is saying for the greater good.
People aren't going to know.
People are not going to know. This happens in the privacy of Bezdin. Edom came in. Bezdin just buries it. There's a cover-up, and
This
life.
happens all the time.
Life goes on. Life goes on. I mean, because it's got to happen. Bezdin needs to be able to function. They have to have some street cred. If they're not going to be trusted, it's not going to happen. This is what the Meiri says. Comes along others and say, just to protect Bezdin, you're letting people put to death, freely, and Edom who did basically murder, are just escaping scot-free. It doesn't make any sense. What's the cheshbon here? So come other Rishonim, the Chinuch and Rabbi Yosef Bechar Shar, and they introduce another mahalach. Why is Bezdin allowing this? 1 second, I should remember this last one. 1 second, this one slipped in my mind. How many are we up to? How many terutzim are we up to already to the kasha? This is that one. This is the last one. The last one's like this. So this is something interesting. He says like this: if you have a family member who's hauled into Bezdin and is being sentenced to death, Edom came and said that he's going to be sentenced to death, right? If you're a good family member, you're going to be turning over every rock and every stone to try to vindicate your family member, right? You're going to be doing whatever you can. He says that's all. Kozman, the guy wasn't put to death yet. When a guy wasn't put to death yet, you're still exhausting every appeal. You're reaching out to every lawyer, every judge, every possible contact to see what you could do to turn it over. But the minute your relative is put to death, now you're up to just the nakama stage. Now you're up to the retribution stage. Now there's no more saving anymore. The death happened. There's no more saving. So Chazal felt when we're up to the retribution stage, what's going to happen is like this. It's going to leave itself as a system that's rife for abuse. Because what's going to happen is anybody who gets punished, his family is just going to hire Edom to come say that those Edom were fake and put them to death to get them back. And then it's just going to be an endless cycle of Edom coming and saying, these guys are false, and each one's killing. Retribution, Bezdin doesn't want to be involved in. Bezdin wants to be involved in the punishment, and you want to try to intervene at a time to save him, go for it. Do everything you can. But afterwards, when it's retribution, we can't let that happen. That's just going to lead to a galgal chayzer. And these are the various different, there's maybe even more than this. This is 5 or 6 reasons that the Rishonim gave. So Rabbi Akiva Sportas, in his letter to Rav Shalom Matari, he says, granted, some of these are easier to understand than others, some of them are more shver than others, but the Rishonim of all stripes addressed this question, all said various different terutzim, and you see, not a single one of them had a havmina that what you're saying was true. Nobody breathed the word of the idea that no, really he is getting put, these Edom are really getting put to death, and what you're saying is true. He says, how do you go about introducing something brand new to the a brand new pshat like this, an out-of-the-box pshat like this, is something that all the Rishonim, many Rishonim addressed, and then they wouldn't say it. And the letters go back and forth, and they each have crafty rayas to how they're allowed to say it or not say it, and diukim and the lashon. And I'll spare you, I won't go through every detail of their 5 letters back and forth. But it's a fascinating discussion about defending the honor of the Gemara. That's really what it is. Rav Shalom Matara's agenda over here is to defend the cover of the Gemara. He understood the attacks that it was facing. He understood the community that he was dealing with. The people that he was talking to were people who had major internal challenges, meaning they grew up in a church that were vilifying the Gemara to them in every lecture. They heard all the tinus against the Gemara. They heard how not beseder the Gemara is, and still they came back and they were struggling. These were people who were struggling with how to deal with this, meaning things have to make sense to them. And Shalom Ratara, in an effort, L'Shem Shemayim, obviously, to straighten this out for them and to explain to them a way that would make sense to them, that would sound sensible and logical, he came up with this creative idea. Yaakov Sasportas is the ultimate traditionalist, the ultimate, it's not my job to please anybody, I don't have to make you happy, you don't understand, that's life, but this is what the Rishonim say and nothing more than it. And this is, I just found, someone just put this out, it's a whole kuntras about this back and forth argument. That's what I have for you.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.